This just into CNN breaking news. The judge in the Hunter Biden case making a surprise decision after a whirlwind morning in court. Let's get to CNN's Kara Scannell, who's outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware. Kara, bring us up to speed. What is the latest?
Yeah, Boris, so the judge said that she could not accept the plea agreement as it was structured. Remember, there was a plea agreement where Hunter Biden would plead guilty to 2 tax misdemeanors and then a diversion on a felony gun charge. Well, the judge taking issue with both of them, saying that on the plea agreement related to the tax charges, she was saying that this agreement as structured just had her, as what she said, a rubber stamp. It did not allow her to weigh in on whether she thought that the plea was acceptable. She had questions about that and wants both sides to brief her on that. Also on the gun diversion, she had questions about how that deal was structured because it inserted her in the process if Hunter Biden breached the terms of this agreement and the government had an issue with it. They wanted the judge to act as a neutral arbiter because they cited the political nature of this investigation and of who Hunter Biden is. So the judge saying she wasn't sure it was constitutional for her to have a role that could interfere with the Department of Justice, the executive branch's decision to bring a criminal case. So she said she wanted additional briefing on this. She told Hunter Biden, I am sorry. She said she knew he wanted to resolve this, but she said she wanted to make sure he got what he understood he was getting in terms of immunity under that plea agreement and that the diversion agreement was constitutional. So both sides will be briefing on this issue, and the judge will then have them back in court again to resolve this matter. But as it stands right now, Hunter Biden entered a plea of not guilty because he said he would only plead guilty if this plea agreement was intact. Boris?
Kara, please stand by. We also have Evan Perez with us. Evan, just a moment ago, we were talking about the back and forth, this ordeal where prosecutors walked in with Hunter Biden's defense team. They had something laid out, an agreement on these 2 federal charges for tax evasion and the gun charge. And then essentially there was a dispute over the agreement. They then went into recess, came up with a new agreement, but the judge ultimately decided it was invalid. It wasn't up to her standard.
Right, and I think at issue here for the judge is she's trying to protect Hunter Biden's rights. She's trying to make sure that whatever he thinks he is agreeing to is indeed what the government is agreeing to do. And the reason why that is in question is because the judge, as a result of the judge's questions, the prosecution admitted that there were some aspects of this that are not covered, that there are some aspects of this investigation. Remember, Boris, this is a 5-year investigation, an investigation that has spanned 3 U.S. attorneys general all the way back to 2018. We have a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who has been held over by Joe Biden's administration to continue this investigation. It has looked at everything from money laundering, from this potential violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act. It's looked at his, obviously, his drug issues, and of course these tax issues. And what the Justice Department was saying at this court hearing was that there is some aspect of this that is still ongoing, that is still being investigated, and that really Hunter Biden still has some legal jeopardy over. And so that's the reason why she has these concerns, because she wants to make sure that anybody who's agreeing to plead guilty, that they understand what they're pleading guilty to. Because in the end, obviously, if that is not really buttoned up, it raises constitutional questions, obviously, for the defendant. So what it appears now is going to happen is that the 2 sides are going to go back to the table and try to work out what it is that they can agree to. And then they can come back to the judge. But it appears the judge is going to ask them to put this all in court filings, and then she will bring them back to make sure that there's an agreement that she can consider to be constitutional. Boris.
Evan Perez, please stand by. Jim, obviously this is a case with immense scrutiny. It appears the judge wants every detail analyzed very, very closely.
No question, and perhaps in the interest of both parties, we're joined by now, in fact, bringing back just a few minutes later, Elliot Williams, a former prosecutor himself. So looking at this now, you heard Evan Perez's description there as the judge, in effect, looking out for Hunter Biden's interests here, that he knows exactly what he's getting out of this deal and what he's not. Do you share that reading of this?
Yes and no, because I think the judge doesn't live in a vacuum and knows that there's a tremendous congressional and media scrutiny around it, so it's not just about the defendant's rights. Now, in terms of this whole rights question in the Constitution, it's important to know what a plea deal or sort of a plea hearing is, Jim. And it's the defendant's not just saying, I'm guilty of the crime. The defendant is, number one, waiving a number of rights he has. He has the right to a trial in front of his peers. He has the right, you are waiving, or at least acknowledging that you may not be allowed to vote after being convicted, that you may not be allowed to possess a firearm, ironically, after being convicted of a crime. All of these things are rights that a defendant waives, and a judge needs to ensure, and the parties, frankly, need to ensure that the defendant is aware of those things before he says, I'm guilty. Because all of those things could jeopardize the integrity of the plea down the road and give the defendant a right to reopen it or appeal it at some point. So she is onto something. You really need to be clear the defendant knows what, under the Constitution, he is getting rid of by agreeing to plead guilty.
Understood. Okay, so I asked you last time we spoke, just moments ago, and we thought we had a deal, whether you thought the penalties Hunter Biden is facing are in line with how these crimes are generally charged. You said yes. When you look at the judge's involvement in this plea deal, of course, there's an enormous amount of attention, which you cite here on this, so probably taking a little bit of extra care. But do you see the judge doing anything kind of out of line as they discuss this, or does it seem on the up and up and as one would expect?
Right now it does seem to be up and up. When we talk about out of line, the problem is that there isn't really there's a template for firearms and tax cases. Those exist. There isn't really a template for the son of the current president being charged and pleading guilty to a crime. And I do think that every party involved with this, including the court, is being extra careful, or ought to be extra careful, to recognizing the maelstrom that will certainly follow if something gets wrong in how this matter is resolved.
Though ideally, you want it to be everyone equal under the law as well. But we know the scrutiny that we're living in right now. Elliot Williams, thanks so much, Boris.
Thanks,
I understand Kara's got some more news.
Yeah, we've got some reporting now from Kara Scannell, who is standing outside the federal courthouse for us in Delaware. Kara, obviously the judge in this case, coming out and saying that parts of this deal contain non-standard terms. She described it as unusual. Walk us through what that was like in court and what specifically she was scrutinizing that she found unusual.
Right, so she was focusing when she made that comment on the gun diversion agreement, saying that in other instances where she's had cases where someone was on drugs and they had purchased a firearm, that was usually brought as a false statement case. That is something that we know that prosecutors, according to our sources, were looking at in this case as part of their plea negotiations. They had worked it down into this diversion for a possession charge, which is a serious felony. But this was an issue she had questions about, of whether it was constitutional, because there was a ruling in the Third Circuit on another case, and a question of whether this law that he is pleading to is constitutional. So she was saying, what if this is eventually decided that this law is unconstitutional? What happens here? Maybe you should have brought this as a false statement. But both sides saying that this was what they had agreed to, and then the judge was just pushing on this point. They said that they would accept it, that this was a contract between the parties, that they would both agree to the terms of that. Biden's lawyer said that even if the law that this agreement was found unconstitutional, it wouldn't matter. They would still abide by the terms of this. But this judge obviously having a lot of concerns about the constitutionality of the structure of these agreements, as well as the substance. She was saying that it looked like they were trying to do form over substance today because of the eagerness to get this done. But she said she wanted to make sure that this was done appropriately. And as Evan said, she is looking here to protect the interests in many ways of Hunter Biden, to make sure he knows exactly what he is pleading guilty to and exactly what the terms are of this deal, what the prosecution could do or not, because of course there could be changes in the administration and it's not necessarily clear there's where anyone else would look at this. This investigation was under both the Trump administration and the Biden administration. It's been many years in the works, but there is a lot of politicalization around it. So she's wanting to make sure that everything lines up legally and that Hunter Biden knows exactly what he is pleading guilty to.